safeguard themselves through self-harm. We've obviously got a long-term hunger striker there. They showed us where one man tried to commit suicide. It's also an oppressive physical environment. So the combination of those two factors is very concerning.
With so great are the numbers now coming, the government also says that some asylum seekers will be released into the community in Australia with what are called bridging visas. Opposition leaders say it all shows the government has lost control of the country's borders, that it must find new ways of stopping the boats coming. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News in Sydney.
Wednesday has been a day of violence in Pakistan, with at least 12 people killed when a suicide bomber struck a Shiite religious procession in Rawalpindi. Earlier in the day, 2 bombs went off in the cities of Karachi and Quetta, killing another 7 people. There's some flash photography in John McManus's report.
The suicide bomber detonated his explosives in the middle of a procession of Shiite Muslims who were approaching a mosque in a central part of Rawalpindi. Police sources said they'd received intelligence that the march would be targeted, and it seems the bomber was already being frisked by security officials when he pressed the detonator. As well as those killed, more than 30 people, including 9 children, were injured. Police and rescue workers cordoned off the area to try and secure it, while volunteers assisted medics in helping the wounded. 7 people were also killed in explosions earlier in the day in Quetta and Karachi. Pakistan's Prime Minister Raja Pervez Ashraf has condemned the attacks, but the blasts, which all targeted Shiites, have underlined the country's vulnerability to sectarian strife. In recent months, hardline Sunni militant groups linked to Al-Qaeda have increased their attacks against the Shiites. The two communities have differing theological and historical interpretations of Islam. Leaders from the D8 group of developing nations are arriving in Pakistan for a summit on Thursday, focusing on international trade and investment. It's a role the country doesn't often undertake, partly because of concerns about its ability to guarantee security. Those security forces are expected to remain on high alert as the Shiite mourning month of Muharram culminates this weekend. John McManus, BBC News.
This is BBC News, and still ahead. You may have heard of Snoop Dogg and Eminem, but what about Giovanotti? What chance does this Italian superstar have in breaking the American rap scene? Let's look at the stories making newspaper headlines around the world. In the Irish Times, they ask, has the Israel-Gaza ceasefire on the front page? The paper describes the deal as a tentative respite prior to talks on border crossings. The Times in London's front page tells of the financial battle lines being drawn on the imminent EU budget talks that will determine the Eurozone spending for the next 7 years. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's visit to Beijing is on the Moscow Times front page. He met outgoing Chinese President Hu Jintao. The Gulf Times Business Edition reports Syrian National Council leader George Sabras comments on monies needed to rebuild the country if President Assad is toppled. Sabras says an initial $60 billion will be required to begin reconstruction. And finally, comments from Mike Leach, the UK tech entrepreneur who's been accused of carrying out accounting irregularities by Hewlett Packard. This is BBC News. I'm Gavin Gray. The headlines this hour. Clashes have given way to celebrations in Gaza as a ceasefire ends 8 days of fighting between Israel and Hamas. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has urged both sides to stick to their pledges for a truce. The Australian government has begun transferring asylum seekers to Manus Island Detention Centre in Papua New Guinea as part of its plans to deter people from trying to reach Australia by boat. To Central Africa now, where the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo says he's ready to look into the grievances of the M23 rebel group that have taken control of the eastern city of Goma. The UN has accused neighbouring Rwanda of providing military support for the rebels, a charge Rwanda denies. The rebels have now taken a second city and say they'll march on the capital, Kinshasa. The BBC's Gabriel Gatehouse has the latest from Goma.
today that they wield the power here in this city of 1 million inhabitants. The rebels have summoned the people to the stadium. They wait, a little nervously perhaps, to hear what the future holds in Goma under rebel control. The presidents of Congo, Rwanda and Uganda have been meeting in Kampala to try to defuse this crisis, but meanwhile the rebels are busy recruiting. They claim more than 2,500 policemen and soldiers joined their ranks today, handing over their guns to rebel commanders. But this police captain told us he wasn't here willingly. He said he had no choice but to submit. A senior commander addresses the crowd. He promises order, security and to improve people's lives. He also vows to continue the fight all the way to the capital if necessary. Well, this rebel commander just asked the crowd, do they want the rebels to stop here in Goma, or do they want for them to carry on? There's been a huge cheer of encouragement from the crowd. Yes, they say, carry on. These rebels are now flush with success. They feel like they hold all the bargaining chips, and it will be up to the Congolese government to come to them to negotiate. If the rebels mean what they say, then this is a conflict that is now in danger of spreading throughout Congo and possibly beyond. Gabriel Gatehouse, BBC News in Goma.
Well, now for a look at some of the day's other news. NATO says Turkey has asked for Patriot defense missiles to be deployed on its territory near the border with Syria. NATO says the deployment would help Turkey defend its population, and the alliance will discuss the request very soon. Turkey has complained of cross-border shelling from Syria as the conflict there intensifies. The human rights group Amnesty International says Bahrain has failed to follow through with promised democratic reforms and has again resorted to harsh measures to put down an anti-government uprising. So far, more than 55 people have been killed in clashes between the authorities and the Shiite-led protesters, demanding a greater political voice in the Sunni-ruled kingdom. In Libya, the funeral of the police chief in the eastern city of Benghazi has taken place. He was assassinated early on Wednesday morning. Faraj al-Dursi was targeted outside his home in a drive-by shooting. More than a dozen security officers have been assassinated this year in Benghazi. Last year, El Salvador had the second highest murder rate in the world. Much of the violence was sparked by a conflict between the country's two most violent street gangs. But earlier this year, a truce was brokered between these two criminal groups, and the number of murders has dropped by 60%. The BBC's Linda Presley reports from El Salvador.
The 45 prison of Cahuta Beki was built for 300 inmates. Now it holds 900. These men all belong to the 18th Street gang, one side in a vicious war. It was in El Salvador's jails that the truce was negotiated with imprisoned gang leaders.
Our country has been on a gang war for a long time, and we believe that if we are part of the problem, that we can be part of the solution. We don't want our kids to die anymore, you know?
In communities once dominated by bloody street battles, people are freer to go about their business.
Entre 1,400, there have been between 1,400 and 1,900 fewer murders this year than last. It's incredible, but this isn't just a product of the truth. It's a part of a bigger strategy. The truth isn't the solution to violence in the country, but without the truth, there is no solution.
Every day, the police still take more gang members to jail. The government's policy of repression hasn't changed. But many Salvadorans are suspicious of the truth, and they want to see more results.
Reduction in homicides, it's a good beginning, but it's not the whole story of the criminality that the Salvadorans are suffering. We need to reduce also the extortion levels, we need to reduce the robbery, we need to reduce the social violence among Salvadorians that bring a lot of grief and a lot of suffering to society.
And some gang members are violating the truth. Young people are still disappearing. Shelby didn't want to be identified. She thinks her son was killed and buried in a secret cemetery by the Malazar Trooper because he was associated with their enemy, the 18th Street gang. Well, the 2,500 members of the Malazar Trooper are in prison here. These are some of El Salvador's most dangerous